3, 2, 1, and we are live. What's happening, Miss Anne Cooper?
Hello, Miss Lisa Farr.
How are you, my love?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. And you?
I am in the middle of a heat wave over here, while you're in the middle of cold Melbourne weather that is going to...
Yes. Yeah, the complete opposite to you.
Yeah, could you send some of that rain our way, please? It's pretty atrocious over here. It is 2020. It is the middle of August.
August, yep.
March, April, May, June, July, August. So we're 5 months into a pandemic, almost to the day. And the whole coffee world has changed. How has your world changed?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's definitely changed, yeah, pretty decently in the sense of, I think for me being a consultant and trainer and really all about being hands-on, with training,
Yeah.
not having that ability to have that one-on-one, contact, with training is definitely something that's had to be reevaluated,
Mm-hmm.
and revisited. And I know that like a lot of us, we've had to think about how to start reaching out to people through online platforms. So yeah, definitely, whether it's, then obviously as trainers, then learning new skills in terms of how to better handle our and delivering our training through, online platforms and, learning, other ways of communicating and teaching. But yeah, it's a real shame because like you do some training sessions and there's always that moment of like, I wish I could just turn around to the roaster and actually do it.
Touch and
It's just that tangible aspect. And I'm sure there's definitely and that's where it can be, I guess, inspiring to be a bit more creative in how you deliver what it is that you'd like. It doesn't always have to be hands-on and tangible. So yeah, I guess I just see the only potential downside is when I get, a lot of inquiries from beginner roasters, if they don't have the equipment, to be able to go back to, is then how do you then work on a platform or a way of teaching and communicating with beginners? Because that's really the premise of, with my course. I mean, it's targeted at both beginners and experienced people, but then we've got the ability to then walk over to a roaster and start applying what we've started to talk about. Whereas, yeah, we don't have that wonderful opportunity to wander over to a machine and start applying it.
Has it
So I guess,
been challenging for you?
I mean, yeah, definitely, because then it's a matter of, I guess, a little bit of reinventing in terms of, well, how do I, if I can't do that, what can I do instead? Yeah, and I guess it's then a matter of just trying to help people understand that they can still reach out to me, through online, and I think it's also people getting used to knowing or that they can do online, consulting and chatting.
Yeah.
So I think that's been really interesting, watching people just better understand using online platforms and there's always that little bit of nervousness of, being a bit nervous about setting it up properly or pressing the right button and, does it work? And then you've got Wi-Fi connections and all that kind of, stuff to deal with. And yeah, so that's been really
our groups have been great, haven't they? The group coaching that we've been doing.
Yeah, the group coaching has been phenomenal. Yeah, and that's, again, big thank you to Map It Forward for,
You're so welcome.
helping me to set that up, because that's been, just a shining light in all of this, knowing that that's there to every 2 weeks, for the last.
And we're going to keep
3 to 4
growing it.
months.
We're going to start more groups. We've just had some inquiries this week about some people who want to join. For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, we have started group coaching for both roasters and business leadership in group settings, so that what would normally be a one-on-one consulting fee, a lot of people can't afford the coaching cost to have a coach every month for a few months on end. And so what we've done is started group coaching where people can learn from each other and each other's questions, and Anne's the coach for the roasting group coaching, and it is inspiring to
Yeah.
watch
Yep.
everyone, isn't it?
It's really cool. Yeah, it's really, really awesome. And it's a really great, environment where you feel comfortable, putting forward just any question that you come across. And we've got, from complete, beginners, from
Oh,
setting up
yeah.
a machine through to those that have been roasting for, maybe a couple of years but still not sure.
Yep.
And, they've had their own little sort of like setup issues on the machine and trying to work out what's the right thing to focus on is probably always the crux of, well, why is this working? Why is this not working? And just really helping them see the value in the right things to focus on so they don't go down this dark rabbit hole of, going in the wrong direction, which, can be a great learning experience. But as long as you know how to get yourself out, of that,
Which is a big problem.
hole.
Most people don't.
Yeah, yeah.
They get down a hole and they're like, oh, I don't want anyone to know I don't know what I'm talking about. So how do I fix this so that I can get back to being in control of where I'm steering towards?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Which leads me to, one of the things that I want to talk to you about today, which is, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm going to pay you a compliment, and I know you don't do well with them. So something that really impressed the hell out of me, and not that I was surprised by it, but it impressed the hell out of me at how well it landed, was when you did the roasting day for a new coffee industry, our recent 3-day workshop online. Yep. And if anyone wants to get access to it, it's there. It's free. You just have to register on the Map It Forward website. But the feedback that we have gotten from people about how many times they've actually watched your presentation, because this was the first time that they were that they had seen a presentation that had taken the perspective of, so hold on, wait, Anne's telling me that I need to look for events that happen in a roast curve and track the life cycle of the roast by the events that are happening, versus I have to follow a strict rule. And now I'm empowered to make decisions.
Yep.
As opposed to I have to follow a formula, or for lack of a better term, but I have to follow the way somebody else has told me to roast. And I really encourage anybody who hasn't seen it, go and watch the workshop. It is fantastic. And the empowerment that people have got, you and I are very aligned in this whole perspective of teach a person to fish rather than give them a fish.
Yep.
And it's this idea of we want to empower people to think for themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
And the way that you teach roasting is all about that.
Yep.
The one thing that I'm confounded by is why this isn't how everybody teaches, and why it's not more popular. Do you think it's because, why do you think it is?
I think the first thing I just made a quick note, just to sort of remind myself, I think, and I know what it feels like to, and I guess this really separates the whole, and it reminds me of, the best barista doesn't always make the best manager. So the best roaster doesn't always make the best teacher. And not that I'm saying I'm not a good roaster, but I feel like I'm a really good teacher because I think about what's involved in describing, because you're actually having to describe, why am I doing this? Because it's all good and well as a teacher to kind of go, well, do this, do that, follow that, and, it's happy days. But you kind of want to know why. So, and that's where I kind of come from, in the sense that, and it's really hard. That was the first word I wrote down, was it's hard. It's actually hard to describe, why am I doing these gas steps? What am I, and that's what I wanted to try and show in the presentation by talking through an actual roast. Well, why did I do that? What am I focusing on? What's driving my decision? what's backing me up, all that kind of stuff. And so, and that's the kind of thing in roasting, is that we are looking for that golden ticket, that golden, just do it this way and you'll be fine. Whereas what we should be realizing, it's kind of like when we're cooking or when we're, baking a cake or whatever, like you're making decisions on the temperature to put it in the oven, when to check it to know that it's ready to pull out, and what, you've got a recipe guide, but you kind of realize, I know here in my home, I kind of realize, my oven doesn't, it's not that hot.
It's got hot spots and cool spots.
Yeah, and I've got to turn it up a little bit. And so I, made a decision. Well, the recipe recommends heat it to 180, but on my oven, I have to go to, 200 or 220 to make it hot enough for whatever reason. So we're very comfortable with making those cooking decisions at home. But for some reason, when we get on the roaster, where we're not applying that same kind of decision process in terms of reminding ourselves that we're actually cooking the coffee, and so we need to get to know our oven or our car that we're driving to, get from point to point, and be okay with that decision and not stress that it's not the right number, the lines don't look right on the screen, all that kind of stuff. And because we've got to realize there's a level of setup involved with all of our individual machines. And I think it's kind of scary and interesting that it's really only been, I reckon, seriously in the last 5 or 6 years, not even that, where we've had that light bulb moment of like, oh yeah, we've all got different probes on our machines and different build quality, different materials and different burners. And like, for those of us that have got, that 20 plus years experience, we sense it. But I don't think we've ever known how to describe why. We've just kind of known, oh, that's just the machine. Like, that's just, that's just the setup. We've never actually gone, yeah, did you actually realize that, the machine I started learning on had a big fat, 6 mil thick probe, versus now we've got really fast, thin probes, and everything, all the numbers are higher and different. So you might go back to something, a really great, article that you saved because you liked it, but its numbers are all different, and you're going, well, why can't I do those numbers on my machine now, because I've got different setup and different controls. I mean, definitely manufacturers over the last 5-10 years in terms of improvements in technology. I mean, when I first started, I had a quite an old Petroncini machine, and we just had we had low and high. That was it. That was all the control we had. And it was basically, you could then, control the energy you had to control the energy through the batch size, and then work out when to turn the burner up, when to turn it down to kind of launch it, and then get it to come out where you needed it. Whereas now, we've got every level of, modulation in terms of control with the gas and the flames and the burners and the build
and
quality
collection
materials
as well.
And yeah, exactly. That's probably been the biggest thing, and knowing what to do with that information as well. So I think, sort of coming back to that whole, why isn't there more of that approach? And I guess it does take a really lot of energy to sit down and analyze it and break it down into, well, I'm doing this, but why am I doing this? And so I'm a really big fan of making sure that people understand why, so they can then take that back to their own equipment and better analyze, the equipment that they're using. But and I'll always say the underlying premise, regardless on what equipment you're working on, we are turning beans from green to brown. That's the most consistent thing that we're all doing.
Yep.
And the timing of that is the most consistent thing. We just got to drive our different, machines accordingly to make that happen. And I think there's got to be a way somehow in the industry, whether it's already started, there's, and I think I've said it before, there's just not enough scientific, proof at the moment in terms of the supporting the, well, if you cook your coffee to this point and make it change color at this point, this is the scientific, answer to what's actually, well, we visually see it, we smell it, we taste it. We just haven't quite, got that scientific, yes, this is what's actually, which is kind of, it's a shame that we're not trusting our senses, that we're not trusting that, where we can actually physically see it happening and we're tasting it, but there's still that but, and it's just, that's really interesting that no matter how many and that would definitely something that I would, and I know some other people have started doing it, is just doing sets of samples, or doing your own exercises where you're changing the timing of different parts in the roast, and then you taste it, and then you write down your thoughts on what it's tasting like. But it's still not that, for some reason, it's not 100% agreeable yet, maybe because of that lack of scientific, backup. I'm sure because I'm talking about it, someone's definitely, trying to, to work more on it.
How is it that we have been doing what we do for so many decades now, and nobody's done this yet? The scientific research.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, whether it's a matter of cost and time and all that kind of stuff. Like, I know, I just reminded me of when I did, which I'm still yet to release, when I did the grind analysis.
I can't wait for you to release that.
Yeah, for Can You Taste the Roasting System, and working with the university and the science department, they very kindly covered the cost of using the lab.
Wow.
And, because then, of course, if and when, I'm hoping next year, it was meant to happen this year at SEA, anyway, that's all.
There's not going to be any trade shows for 2 years.
No,
at least.
No. So
2021, 2022 is completely out. For anyone who thinks in any way that there's going to be trade shows before 2023, you're dreaming.
Yeah. So I think we were hoping to revisit it again, in terms of like writing up the research again for Roast Magazine, to kind of like release it through there.
That's you and Rob?
Yeah, yep.
And you guys should think of coming on the podcast and talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to have a conversation with both of you about this.
Yep, because like with your background as well, and from what you saw, from what I showed you.
Yeah, man, it was so cool.
Yeah, very exciting. And so really lovely. Then obviously, all the university requires, and which is really nice that they obviously get, recognition.
Credited,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's amazing. And Monica, I think Fekete, through that's her surname. I just I know.
If you said that with an Irish accent, Fekete. You could be saying something else then.
Yeah, exactly. And she's amazing. She helped me get into the those labs, and so she's really amazing too. So
I've got to ask you, when you do release that kind of stuff, when you talk about the kind of education that you talk about and the approach that you take to roasting, and we've seen it a couple of times in our groups where you end up seeing that people are paying a lot of attention to your work as well as other people's work, and there's a conflict of the approaches that are being taken.
Yep.
It seems to be a real big problem for roasters in a way because it confuses them. It's that thing that puts them in the hole of like, what do I believe? Which is why I love your approach, in the sense that, listen, I'm not telling you this is what you have to do. What I'm telling you is this is the information, and I want you to learn how to make decisions for yourself. But people get stuck, right?
Yep.
How does that, how do you navigate that?
And it kind of like I guess it kind of highlights like socially, how do we operate as well, in terms of,
as an industry?
Maybe even just as a race as well. Like, how are we taught to believe and take on information? Because I guess does it evolve from, our progression through school, where we're kind of taught, if it's written, if it's in a book, then it's to be believed and focused on. Whereas when you've got someone like myself that hasn't written a book yet,
hashtag watch this space.
Watch this space.
We know something y'all don't know. So
Yeah, so I
hashtag
guess
watch this space.
yeah, 100%. So yeah, I guess, when people are especially in roasting looking for that, yeah, they're genuinely looking for the way, like, and it just yeah, it's a bit tricky. And I guess one thing that I should be saying more often to people that say, well, I mean, it's in the book, I've read it, why are you saying the opposite? I should be sort of saying back, well, is how successful have you been following what's written in the book? And if it's not working for you, then, clearly, we need to then further explore
Right.
why it's not working. And, that's where I can really help you from that practical perspective. But it's a shame that, yeah, practical experience isn't regarded, seems as highly as something that's been documented, in a book. So yeah, it's interesting.
I'm fascinated by it because with all the experience that you have, with all the experience and all the knowledge that you have, I still see people saying, but it's written here in this book that this is what you're meant to be doing. And I don't understand. I did understand before when you taught me, and then I've read this new book's come out and now I'm more confused again. So it seems to me like there's an issue, and this is like not a question, this is like, let's explore this because I'm a little confused by it. It seems that we have an issue with trusting our own senses and ourselves, I guess, as we're learning in the industry of like, well, what do you mean I'm meant to make decisions, but I'm just a puppy roaster. So now you want me to make decisions. You see what I'm saying? Like, is there that kind of, do you think that issue exists in our industry?
Because you mean particularly with beginner roasters in the sense
with
that
most roasters, when it comes to the idea of the way you teach versus the way that other people are getting stuck down this weird rabbit hole when they see something written down and it's in conflict.
Yep.
And then what you're saying to them is, I want you to make a decision for yourself. I want you to understand how it progresses from going from green to brown. And then as it's starting to change, if you know what you need to be doing, then you can make decisions that when you should be adjusting gas and when you should be doing this and when you should be doing that.
Yep.
And from what I've seen, people get fucking terrified.
Yeah, and I think the most terrifying part of roasting is starting and finishing. And because again, that they're two very key decisions. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you know what temperature to start with, and how do you know what temperature to finish at? How do you know what energy to start with, and then how do you know how to work your energy, to finish the roast? So they're pretty big key, decisions about what's going on. And I guess, look, one thing, the books were trying to offer initially was a way to think around that finishing perspective, by offering numbers and values and percentages and all that kind of stuff. And so it just reminded me, I was having a conversation with a roaster yesterday, and I see this still, and they've been roasting easily, and I consulted with them probably about 3 years ago, but still being absolutely petrified to stray beyond like a certain number,
right?
And just trying to help remind them that this percentage is just a percentage of time. It doesn't define the energy that you're using to be able to then finish, especially at the end of the roast. And I think with my approach, what I try and highlight to roasters along with the decision making is the kind of data. Like, I'm all about data. Like, I'm definitely not, definitely not saying ignore numbers. I'm sensory and data together, and they need to work together.
You're speaking my language, lady.
Yeah, and it's about then, and I think what I try and show then roasters to do, and I kind of see it in the classes where the ones that sort of like keep on circling and maybe not progressing as well as they could, is because they're resisting writing down and collecting certain bits of data.
Why do you think that is?
because there's a real sense sometimes, I think, in roasting that it's too much, because there's a lot of multitasking going on while you're roasting. You're managing the machine. You've got this data ticking away on the screen. You've got lines and stuff going everywhere, and things are calculating, and you're staring at it kind of going, well, okay, I've got to make a decision about how I want this to look.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the coffee actually cooking and changing in the roaster. So you've got all these things going on at once. And so it really showcases you. I mean, if you're not into being kind of like organized and structured, I've often joked to myself, I think roasting kind of also shows how much of a control freak you are, because it's very controlling.
Oh, dude,
It
it's
really
a special
shows.
kind of person that can be a roaster. I can't be a
Yeah.
roaster, but it's a special type of personality type, I believe. Very detail orientated, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the word, detail. I think and if you're not that detail kind of person, that's when you get lax, and then you don't back yourself up. I mean, yes, you might have a sheet of paper with all your numbers written down, but then if they're not organized in a certain format, then you're just going to keep on seeing this list of numbers, and it's just going to be a sea of numbers, a sea of numbers, a sea of numbers, and it's not going to help you then relate back to what it is. Well, why do I have these numbers? And I think it's then showing, people the value in how they're recording those numbers, what they connect to in the roaster. Like, it's not just writing down a number for the sake of it. It's actually connected to a physical event in the roaster.
Yeah.
You can then relate it back to then how it's, whatever's going on with your software, obviously also is connected to the probe that you're using, the way it's set up in terms of its position, everything. There could be a wire loose, and then all of a sudden you've got these zigzags going on your screen, and you're confused going, well, what's going on? And so there's lots of interference and things that can then influence the way that you read, what's going on your screen. So I think it's that kind of, if you're not, detailed on how to work, especially with, because I do, really like roasters writing down what I call, my roast log sheet.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most valuable document, that if anybody wants, to get advice on their roasting from me, the first thing I'll just, if I've worked with them before, I'll say, absolutely send me through your roast log sheet, and then you need to then also give me an idea about, what you expect from the roast, like what's your, timing, what's your plan sort of thing. And if it doesn't meet the plan, then we can see very quickly where things are out of spec. And
I've
then
got to ask you, Anne,
it's fixed really easy.
At that, I've got to ask you something in relation to that. Do you find when you say that to people that they're intimidated by that question if they've never worked with you before, because it requires them to have actually understood what you're saying?
Yes and no, but I also think it's because they might be scared about owning up to and actually owning up to a decision. How some people are really scared about backing themselves.
It's a lack of confidence.
Yeah. So a roast log is you backing yourself. It's you showing exactly what's going on in the roast, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, if it's, but there's also, I do believe there's that thought process that, there's too much going on, I don't have time to write down this information. I mean, you've got to make time, and that's when you reevaluate the way that you work. Like when I roast in my production roasting, like some days at the moment, because of what's going on, like I may only need to do 10 roasts, but then on all of a sudden, retail goes through the roof, and then the following week I might have to do 20 roasts.
Right.
Doesn't matter whether I'm doing 5, 10, 15, 20 roasts, even when I was back in the day doing full on production and, you're literally just spending, dare I say, 10 hours, just going hard, doing full on production. And every opportunity, you always make the time to write down your key data, and you build it into your routine. And I think that's also the thing too, is building that detail, that data collection. So by the time I get to first crack in a roast, I've already filled out half of my information. So then all I've got to do is focus on finishing the roast, write down the final time and temps, weigh it, and then I'm on to my next roast. And so, and I think we've talked through before with other people in the groups in terms of the cooling process is a great opportunity to manage your time, your protocol from batch to batch, so that you can give yourself the time, the opportunity to cool the coffee properly, to move on to your next roast in a sensible time, and also give yourself the opportunity to then, I guess, finish that previous roast and then clear your mind so you can, and your focus, so you can move on to the next roast, a lot better. But yeah, definitely the way that you work. And so, yeah, it's a shame. I hope for those of you that are listening, I hope that, you don't feel that, that kind of data collection is a drag on time, when it's actually everything you need. So when you go to taste your coffee, if it doesn't taste right, you know how to troubleshoot it, because it's not meeting, if it's out of spec on what you expect it to be.
Right.
And if it didn't, and that's where you can analyze your profile a lot better. You can just, back yourself up so much better, especially when you come to tasting the coffee. Yeah, easily.
And I think that a big problem there is that people are worried about being judged. And because they're worried about being judged, there's a hesitation to share that data with other people. Do you find that?
Yeah, potentially. I think that's another great point, that whole, being nervous about being judged. And we would have all seen it as well, especially when we go to do tastings and cuppings and all that kind of stuff. There's always a few people that are very nervous about saying what they think, because they don't want to be wrong.
Right. I'm guilty of that. I'm absolutely guilty of that. I still get nervous whenever I go to cuppings. That's just because I'm a weird freak. It doesn't matter how much experience I'll have at stuff. Even if I'm tasting elixir with other people, it took me forever to get to the point where I'm like, Lee, taste is subjective. Get over it. Get over it. Like, it's fine if you taste something different. It's fine if somebody else tastes something different. It's about the conversation that comes from that, so that you can actually explore this together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really fun too when you do get, some different, thought processes, especially when you've got a mix of cultural palettes in the group as well. I think I've given the example before, like strawberry, in strawberries in Korea are way different to strawberries here in Australia. And like, even to something as simple and basic as that is like, wow, they would never use the flavor note of strawberry the same way that we would use it, because it has completely different, flavors and connections for them. So I think, it's a great opportunity to learn from other people. And but for some reason we all still feel a bit nervous about saying what we think, for fear of, whether it be
not being liked,
or being judged,
outcast and judged, and all the stuff that coffee people feel all the time. When I really wish we'd drop that facade, because I feel like it gets in the way of a lot of bullshit. Like, we could be progressing so much more if we weren't worried about just saying what we think about something and not worrying about being judged. Like, a roaster's allowed to dark roast a coffee because that's what their clientele like, and not have to be judged by a coffee wanker, because specialty coffee people are not supposed to like dark roasted coffee. Listen, let people like what they like. Let people roast how they want to roast. How about we all encourage each other?
Yeah, regardless of whether it's light or dark roast, just do it really well. Like, it's a really good challenge, to just do it really well. But I guess that's part of, like, preference and what people like and don't like, and what they think things should be or shouldn't be. What's the influence of their demographic, their market, their, but I think, and again, I think maybe with all of this COVID stuff as well, it's really challenging demographics and expectations, and in order to make sales, people have had to really reevaluate potentially, what they've been doing. And I think it's very interesting.
With what's happening with COVID and with the way that it is influencing our industry, we're seeing an astronomical number of new roasters enter the landscape. And you and I are working very hard to try and create a new normal in the industry by kind of this idea of an approach to education that's all about empowerment, as I mentioned, and all about people thinking for themselves. But on the other side of that coin is making sure that people have enough information and skill to be successful before they jump in feet first, right? And you and I have many conversations about this and how we wish we could find a way to help people just get more informed. We don't want to stop anyone from starting a business or being successful or anything like that, but we would like to help people have a better chance at being successful.
Absolutely. And I think part of me, I kind of thought with this, I respectfully want to say to those people that are considering jumping ship from their current, corporate jobs, please don't give up your day job. And I mean that as respectfully as possible, because I'm seeing it. It's really frightening when you speak to some of these people that have potentially panicked a little bit. And for whatever reason, they feel they don't have an avenue or an opportunity within their industry anymore, and naturally looking to something, like whether it be hospitality, cafes, coffee, roasting, and really underestimating the level of skill, involved in learning to get into that industry. Look, I think they can definitely bring, if it is corporate, for example, bring their corporate experience into the industry, which is awesome because our industry needs it, needs that. But then, definitely underestimating then, look, roasting in particular, it's a skill. It can be learnt, but it takes time to learn. And there's some elements that you'll learn very quickly, for sure. But it is that sense and that decision making, and then the experience with all the different origins that's the bit that takes time, and it's super heartbreaking. I was sitting in a training session last week. Exactly, that probably would have been a third of the people in the group were from corporate and had either cleanly said, "Yep, I'm done. I'm going into roasting, into coffee." And they said the heartbreaking sentence of how can I learn as quickly as possible? How can I do this as quickly as possible? And I'm just like, oh my goodness, That's just so heartbreaking to hear, because whether, as an industry, how are we, not helping them see the level of the skill and time required. Involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard too, because roasting's such a great hobby. It's such a great passion project. It's just fabulous. And so if it was, a home roaster that had been, roasting at home for years, they're well aware of, the absolute, general basics, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. You're going to be able to be at this point, within this kind of certain amount of time for sure. But for someone that's not used to standing on their feet for, 6, 8, 10 hours, 12 hours straight, they're not used to then the kind of the thought process in terms of what's involved with the skill of, roasting, then they're definitely not going to enjoy it. They're definitely going to find aspects that they won't enjoy. And so, like you said, it's definitely not about stopping people. If they want to have a go.
We want people to be successful.
Yeah, 100%.
We need a more successful industry. There are too many people failing in our industry, not just during COVID. This has been happening for exactly
a long time. Yeah, exactly.
It's a couple of decades now that our industry has been saturated by people with that whole mindset of how it can't really be that hard to have a roasting business, or it can't really be that hard to start a cafe. And I love seeing people so passionate about coffee and roasting coffee and wanting to experience the industry, and that's wonderful. But what we need, and you and I have been speaking about this at length, is how can we better prepare people for
Yep.
this endeavor, because people are
Yep.
making reactionary decisions that are getting them into roasting businesses, and they're taking their severance money or their redundancy money, and they're saying, well, all right, I got 50 grand. I got 50 grand to play with. I'm going to buy a roaster. I'm going to buy some green bean, and I'm just going to start roasting and start up a business. It can't be that hard,
Yep.
right? Well, look, if you're going to set up a place, actually, why don't you tell us? I've seen it many times why it's not right. I'd love people to hear it from you, why that's not a good idea. This idea of like, I'm just going to buy a roaster and start roasting. I have no experience and I'm just going to get going.
I think I think it comes back to that. Well, obviously learning the skill, and then it brings up that, I think, that natural human emotion of nervousness and fear, because if you're not good at the skill, then of course, you try and search and you try and learn, and then then you go through those different levels of like, well, what's right, what's wrong, all that kind of stuff. You start getting confused. So there's that aspect of the education of learning the skill. But then I think there's a big underestimation in terms of how expensive it is in actually setting up a roastery properly. And then
money and time, right? Not just
money.
not
Yeah,
just,
definitely. Yeah, and then knowing, well, what's the right equipment to invest in? What's all the different what are all the different levels I've got to meet in terms of permits and council regulations, and how do I know it's the right setup? And look, yeah, there's definitely some good resources out there to try and learn that, but it's still a little bit of like, it is a little bit like learning on the ground, because surprisingly, a lot of local councils don't have a lot of experience with roasteries. So then they start suggesting really crazy kind of setups that don't suit. And so there's that aspect. And then there's the tasting aspect, which I think surprisingly a lot of these new people really underestimate. They forget that we're roasting something to be tasted.
yeah.
And so you really have to own up to and understand what it is that you want people to taste. Oh, I don't have time to do tasting. There's too much,
Sensory development is such an important part of a roaster's job.
It is. And so, and kind of like breaking down that thought process of doing your quality checking in whichever format you choose. But for some reason over time, like cupping has been seen as this kind of really wanky kind of thing to do. Like, it's not been seen as being valuable. It's a waste of time.
Hold on, help me understand that. I don't get that.
So a lot of roasters will say they don't cup their coffee because it's like, definitely with certain people I've consulted with, they won't cup because it's seen as being a snobby thing to do, or it's not because they've never been shown the value of why they should be cupping,
right,
and where to direct what it is that they've found in that cupping. Like, how do they relate it back to their production roasting? How do they then know? It's also because they're scared and nervous about coming back to that, being judged. Do they know how to do it? So then they just go, oh, no, it's too hard. Or
but it's such a confidence building tool.
Yeah, totally, 100%. And when it's directed and used appropriately, then, it's not seen as this time-wasting exercise. It's actually a very valuable exercise to be doing for a production, team. And I think the biggest, I kind of see, how it occurred, but I really don't like public cuppings. I really think it's broken down the value of cupping being a professional event. Yeah, and I think it's really broken down the value of it being a professional tool for roasters. And it does then highlight when you do a public cupping, especially those that haven't done it before, and kind of like rightly so, they're a little bit horrified by, what's going on with all the sloping. They don't.
It can be intimidating though.
It's very intimidating. Yeah, totally. That whole process of slurping and then spitting, and then we're sharing. That's the great thing about COVID. It's really highlighted our practices, with public cuppings in particular.
Do you remember back in like January, February when I was like raising alarms? I'm like, are you concerned about public cuppings and COVID? And everyone thought I was a fucking moron.
Yeah, I just don't. From a hygiene perspective and a quality perspective, if it's not managed, then no one's going to get a consistent flavor in the cup. No one's going to get a consistent experience. So yeah, I would much rather do a tasting, like actually get the same coffee and brew it,
Batch brew
3
it,
different
or,
ways. Yeah, because consumers are more comfortable with that tasting aspect. So people, that are coming from other industries have that consumer mindset as well, that drinking, not tasting, they're drinkers. They just drink coffee because they like it. They have to learn how to be a taster. So that in itself is also a big challenge as well, because they're being challenged to then own up to what it is that they like and don't like. And then they're being challenged to put out a product to people to like. So there's this whole process of being liked, I guess.
I think it's a big, it's a systemic problem in our industry because we have such a low barrier to entry. This seems to be an industry people come to want to belong somewhere, because we have this. I mean, I remember when I came out of corporate into coffee and I got my first coffee job, I couldn't believe I was paid to socialize and make coffee.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. I kept saying to my boss at the time, he's like, are you okay? Are you, aside from the fact that anytime something said caution hot surface, Lee's hands would find their way there.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't used to that environment. But the idea that you come out of corporate where everyone's very to themselves and it wasn't as friendly as what the cafe environment was, and now all of a sudden you're getting paid, and paid well in Sydney, to make coffee and socialize with people.
Yep. Yep.
And you want to be liked, and you feel like you belong because you're giving people that one thing in their day that won't bitch back to them.
Yep.
And so your customers love you and your co-workers, and you get on really well, and et cetera, as long as you're not talking about the technical stuff, right? Because then it gets competitive and, oh my God, somebody's going to figure out I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, and how do I hide that? And then the intimidation starts to creep in, and then it all breaks down. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish we'd get over that as an industry, and I don't see that happening. I thought we would have by now, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you see it amongst roasters as much as it exists in the cafes? This idea of, oh shit, people are gonna figure out I'm a fraud and I don't know what I'm talking about, and I just want to be liked. I don't want people to think that I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't. No, I don't think so. I mean, I would like to say there's, been some improvement in terms of the roasters I deal with anyway. Like when they reach out. I was
going to say, you deal with, who are you dealing with? Because I see it amongst roasters a lot. You're such a nice person. That's the difference. You're such a nice person that you could never see that in anybody.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that there's that a couple of people I've worked with that they know they took on a really big, if they bought a cafe, it had a roaster in it. They knew that they were taking on what they were taking on, and that it would, take them some time to wrap their head around it. But I don't think they feel like they're kind of
faking it.
Faking it, yeah. They're genuinely trying to, to work it out. And I would hope they feel okay, putting their hand up, going, "Yep, you know what? I'm a bit stuck. Can you help me out in terms of it's not tasting right, or why did this happen? Why did this happen? Basically, something went really wrong in a roast, and it's them building definitely building trust in themselves that they made the right or the wrong decision, but why was it the wrong decision? That kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
You've never come across really arrogant roasters who know everything?
Yeah, there's definitely those roasters
And they
for
actually
sure.
don't know what they're
Don't.
talking about. You haven't come
It's
across
probably
any of them?
yes, I have. But it's probably in the sense of then, yeah, are they arrogant because they don't know how to communicate? They don't know how to verbalize.
Ladies and
Because
gentlemen,
they,
hence why I'm saying she's really nice.
yep.
See, she's making excuses for them.
Well, it's probably why they're coming across as being arrogant, is because
they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, they're challenged. They're challenged to.
You're so nice.
They can't. Well,
that's okay that they're arrogant because they don't know what they're talking about. They don't want anyone to know what they're talking about. Leave them alone, Lee.
No.
No, my thing is like I wish that we'd unhook ourselves as an industry from this need to be right or this worry about anyone figuring out that we don't know what we're talking about.
Yep.
I used to be one of those people too. Like, remember back in the days, like almost 20 years ago, where the double Rizzy was the thing.
Yep.
And then it went from the double Riz to a very, very short single Riz, and then to a very, very long double espresso. And at every point, we thought we knew what we were talking about.
Yeah,
because
true.
somebody else told us that was what we were supposed to like.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's that whole, like, I'm putting my hand up. I was that person who was like, I don't really like this, but the guys I'm working with are telling me, that my head baristas are telling me that this is what we're supposed to like. Okay, I'll figure out how to make it and I'll tell people this is what's right. Yep. It's why I'm so passionate now about, like, let's teach people to have their own opinions.
Yep.
And to say to people,
definitely.
This is what I like and this is why I like it. This is what we serve in this cafe because this is what we like. We'd like to serve you a balanced espresso, or we like serving acidic espresso, or we like serving majority sweet espresso. I don't care. Serve what you want to serve. Just understand why you want to serve that and then make no apologies for it.
Yep. And because that's a really interesting, thing that it highlights back to, whether it's coming from head baristas or the owners of the business, it's got to come from the top down, that kind of stuff. And whether there's still not enough of that happening, definitely seeing a disjoint in terms of barista skill versus the technology that they're expected to use in the machines.
Do you think that confuses people and challenges them, or they're scared of it?
Yes and no. I think the art of tasting has been lost a little bit. Yep. With that reliance on, and again, I'm not against brew ratio numbers, not at all, but whether you get some baristas they start really stressing if the numbers don't exactly kind of match, and then they'll blast through a kilo of coffee just trying to get something to work.
Right.
They're not really understanding the technology of what's going on. That machine, that grinder is now really hot. You then might have a pause. You might not make another coffee for another 10, 15 minutes. So the temperature on your grinder is going to change. So
therefore your grind particle size is going to change, and
everything's going to change.
The flavour is going to change, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and then just the technology on the machines in general in terms of programming, general use, pressure profiling, all that kind of stuff. When you watch baristas, like when they're getting smashed, they just want to be able to do it as fast and consistent as possible. And sometimes I think the technology on the machines is defeating the purpose for that purpose.
Do you remember back in the day when we used to the click on the side of the rober on the grinders, when we used to go 1, 2, 3 clicks when we were dosing?
Yes. Yep.
We wouldn't weigh anything. It was how many clicks. That was my first job, right?
Yep, exactly. And making sure the chambers were always full, so there was no pockets and all that kind of stuff.
And making sure, I mean, back then it was like, well, if the hopper's full, it's going to change the grind size, as opposed to if it's empty. So make sure that there's always ground coffee, and you dose 3 clicks. And if you're dosing 3 clicks every single time, filling it to the same amount, you're going to be consistent. But we believed that back then.
Yep.
We're really showing our age, Anne.
I know. But yeah, no, definitely, very big fan of, the weighing in and out and, having a range. I think it's really important with your extraction times so that there's no stress about if it's not exactly right. You've got that range to work with, and helping baristas then know the flavor impact, with that range, especially in a busy environment. That's really important. But yeah, it's got to come from the top down, so you don't, when you've got a rogue barista that takes a product in a different direction because it's what they think, it should be tasting like. And if they don't have that direction from, whether it's the manager, the business owner, then you're going to lose, customers and business very quickly. It's the same with roasters. When you get a rogue roaster, oh my God, it's just catastrophic. It's like, and I've definitely seen businesses, I've worked with businesses before that were on the brink of like losing their business because unfortunately, like a roaster gets something in their head. And this comes back to direction as well. If the business owner isn't firm enough to be able to go, no, this is how my product needs to be roasted because it's going to taste like this, and we're going to be able to sell it. Like, when you start going in the opposite direction, and it was unfortunately, in those years when we were all experimenting with super light roasting and really misunderstanding how to do it well. And so, and then you've got business owners that they need, like, it's because they're focusing on other things in the business. They need that person in there roasting for them. If that person isn't being, I guess, for better word of a way of saying, not monitored or, checked just to make sure, if they don't have a clear direction in terms of, parameters to hit, all that kind of stuff, then of course they're going to go off in a direction and kind of go, well, I read that I'm supposed to be doing this. We should be doing the coffee like this, and this is the way it's going to happen. And the business owner's like,
but that's
okay,
not how we do it here, bro.
Yeah, but then if you've got a business owner that isn't strong enough to go, that they might just go, okay, well, if that's what is the current industry thing to do, then, and if they don't understand themselves, and that's kind of highlights in terms of a lot of us that learn on the job a way, and then not being taught. I guess coming back to why my teaching approach is supporting decision making and the whys. If we've never been taught why, you do get then stuck in that, we'll just do it this way and that's it. Like it's like, well, why? And so if the business owner isn't able to say, well, okay, that's great that you've read that. That's great that you think it needs to be this light. I need you to do it this way because of, X, Y, Z. Like there's a view and a solution, to that. So, it's quite terrifying. I've seen some really good businesses almost just completely, go. If a business owner isn't strong enough to be able to stand up and go, you know what, this isn't right. And I was really proud of one of the roasters I've worked with for quite some time. He knew, like he got in contact and said, I need some help. I need to know how to be stronger.
More assertive.
He knew he had a rogue roaster. But he was in a situation, unfortunately, his mum passed away, so he had to sort of like deal with that. And he just needed someone, to keep the roasting going. And so this roaster was so it's a little bit of, unfortunately, from his behalf, he knew that they were unmonitored. So whether in terms of, direction and like he had his profiles there for them to follow. Absolutely. That was all there. That was a given. But unfortunately, the roaster they put in place felt they kind of had the right, I guess, to then start taking the roasting in a different direction because they were reading and they were, doing all this other, kind of exploring, and started taking the product in a very different direction to what they needed. And so, I think I found out last week or the week before, Yeah, that
Had to let
he
him
let
go?
that roaster know, yeah, that he couldn't have them roasting there. But I guess that could have been avoided, if, he felt, if he had that more assertive approach in the
Right.
sense of, it needs to be this way, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so I guess again, it brings up really interesting situations in terms of how we work, the situations we're faced with,
Professionalism.
professionalism, yeah, all that kind of stuff. And the hospitality is, yeah, whether it be cafes or roasteries, is still a little bit rife with that when you do have potentially an inexperienced or not a very assertive business owner. That's when, things start going a little bit pear-shaped, because then you want to, you want to support your team and you want to empower them to a point, but you've got to make sure that they're,
In alignment with the
supporting.
brand, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, brand alignment. And I think that's something we can learn from
Oh, yeah.
better from other industries for sure. Absolutely.
I had a situation where when I was working at Harry's, my last barista job in Australia before I moved here, and we had a roaster, and you know how busy Harry's is. It's like, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of
Yep.
espresso-based drinks a day. Like, it
Yep.
doesn't get more vomit-worthy in the sense of how hard you have to work in a shift than something like Harry's.
Yep.
And on the weekends, Noah, the owner of Collective Roasting Solutions, for anyone who doesn't know who Noah Adra is, he and I would work the weekends there together. And we had got this coffee that we had had previously, and this coffee was beautiful. But this one week we got this coffee, and no matter who was trying to dial this coffee in, no matter how many days we were trying to dial it in, we all decided that the word to describe the flavor profile we were getting was bile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we'd never tasted it before. And
Oh,
I
my
said to them,
goodness.
guys, we were all trying to dial it in. Chris tried to dial it in. I tried to dial it
Yep.
in. Noah tried to dial it in. Like, that's 3 gun baristas that are working hard at dialing these coffees in. We even let the puppy barista, even let Cornea dial it in. And he's like, I can't make it work, Miss Lee. And I said to them, guys, like, the only word I can use to describe this coffee is that taste that you get after you throw up.
Oh, no.
And they agreed. So, the owner gets on the phone, calls the roaster and says, hey, listen, like, we need to send this coffee back. There's something wrong with it. We don't know what it is. We've all had a go at trying to dial it in. We can't get it to taste right. And the customer's noticing.
Yep.
Send it back. They had no problem with it. They send us another batch. Same problem.
Yeah, wow.
So the head roaster comes in and says, and this is a different roaster than what they're using now. They're not using this roaster anymore because they're roasting their own now. And he comes in and he orders an espresso, and he says, so listen, I heard you guys were having a problem with the coffee. And we said, yeah, like none of us could dial it in. And he said, well, we dialed in the coffee back at the roastery and it was fine. I'm like, okay, have you got a new roaster? And he said, well, actually, I asked one question before that. I said, did you roast it? And he said, no. I said, do you have a new roaster? And he said, well, yes, but that shouldn't make a difference. He's using my profiles. Okay. Now, this is where you could lose wholesale customers. Mm-hmm. Because now what you're saying, you're insulting 3 gun baristas and telling them that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, when we're clearly telling you 2 100-kilo batches that you're sending us all taste like the taste that comes after you vomited.
Yep. Oh my God.
And what it was there was a rogue roaster that had decided that this was how the coffee should be roasted. And they weren't getting monitored closely enough. So we just said, don't send us this coffee anymore.
Yep.
Send us a different coffee. We don't want this single origin.
Yep.
And it can really cause a problem, right? Like, especially for a
100%.
business owner, your wholesale customers are counting on you to pre-QC a coffee and make sure that when I'm getting it,
Yep.
it's already been squeaky cleaned. You know,
Yep.
like you've QC'd it. Yes, it's good to go, especially for a cafe that's doing 100 kilos a week and then some.
Yeah, definitely.
It can
And
really affect the business, right?
yeah, and that sort of brings up the whole, back to, it's really sad if roasters see QC as being time wasting. Like they should know what their coffee tastes like, before, or by the time it gets to their customers. So if and when something does pop up, they can be already troubleshooting it or working out a solution. So, and that's definitely something, for those new getting into the industry as well, kind of underestimating the value of, when to, best times to do it, how to do it, how to back yourself when you're tasting it, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely, yeah, super important.
And this is the kind of stuff that you learn working under somebody, right? Like workflow and what's required and what the little nuanced things in how to set up a roast and I can't say this, but you'll decipher it for me. Maybe I don't know why I can't say it, but between batch protocol. I have to take pauses, long pauses between each of the words, because I feel like my accent is like now half Australian, half American. And so when I say between batch protocol, if I say it quickly, my tongue and my lips trip over themselves. I can't say it.
Yeah, wow.
Anyway, it's annoying as shit because the number of roasters that I consult with, or I do consulting for, every time I go to say that, it causes people to laugh. So I don't say it anymore. But understanding that that's what's required is something that you learn from apprenticing under someone good. And so if you're going to open your own business and you don't understand these things, it's a real problem, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I guess you bring up a really interesting point, that word apprentice, because there's definitely, whether it's something, as an industry we need to better work out, and having that kind of, system in place. My only concern is that there's not enough jobs, available.
Oh, yeah.
If they do go through some sort of apprentice, kind of scheme. Definitely get lots of inquiries, lots of emails from people saying, let me come into your roastery, I'll work for free. But then the issue with that is that then they're expecting whoever it is to teach them and pass on their expertise and take the time. And that's where it highlights again the whole, you may be a good roaster, but are you good at teaching? Do you have the ability to then communicate? Because it takes a lot of effort to decipher, translate and communicate, what's going on. It takes a lot of effort. And I can understand why roasters would get potentially annoyed if they get approached, by someone really, really eager going, let me come and work for you for free. As long as you teach me how to roast, kind of thing. It's kind of like, well, that's all good and well, but that's also a big,
disruption
effort
to my workflow.
It's a big expectation on my thought process and communication ability and all that kind of stuff. So it's tricky. It's really tough because I see the value, and I even thought about myself because I do production once a week, and I thought about it would be great to potentially post roasting, like people, once they've done the course, there's always that, well, what's next, especially if they're wanting to get into it, and providing that opportunity for them to come in and actually experience being a production roaster would be a great thing to do. But I would be okay with that because I'm in that mindset of being able to show them that. Thank you.
You really are. Again, sorry for complimenting you. I know you don't like that, but it's true. The thing is, like, a friend of mine has a PhD in education, and he specifically studied how your brain works when you're working on a task and then you have to split your attention between the task you're working on and a second task. And so your brain doesn't attribute the same bandwidth to as you had on just focusing on one task to focusing on both those parts. It splits the bandwidth. And so therefore, like we're talking about a roaster who's paying attention to what they're doing. We've said it's a detail-orientated job. And then all of a sudden they've got an apprentice who's asking questions while they're doing what they're doing. And they have to split their attention between focusing on what they're doing, listening for what they're doing. And roasting is a whole sensory thing, right? You got to be able to hear it. You've got to be aware of temperatures and what's happening with the data, et cetera, et cetera. And you've now got this person that's standing there saying, oh, like, what happens now? Well, do you want me to get this ready, or et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
And so it really could get in the way of their success in their own job or just finishing on time.
Yeah, true. Yep. All of that. So, which is, again, it's kind of like it's, I kind of want to say like it's tricky, it's heartbreaking, because you want people to learn, you want them to be able to experience and learn on the job, all that kind of stuff. But then at the end of the day, if they're not then going to set themselves up, it's like then still where do they go? You know, what's the opportunity for them after that in terms of, you know, finding work, you know, all that kind of stuff. So whether, you know, companies still prefer to promote within and, you know, do training on the job, you know, that way, or if they were advertising for a role, you know, what's the kind of person they're after? Do they want to still be able to train somebody? Do they require someone with experience? You know, it brings up so many really interesting, you know, situations. But the apprenticeship kind of thing is a really, it shouldn't be tricky, but it kind of is a little bit tricky with roasting, I think, anyway. Having a program that can't necessarily promise, you know, an actual job, you know, at the end of it. Whereas when you do a trade, you know, you can do your electrical or your plumbing or whatever, and you know that you pretty much, you can get work, you know, fairly easily.
Why haven't they turned roasting into a trade? It should qualify, right? Like,
totally. Because it's as skill based as, you know, other trades in terms of I mean, for a lot of us, like, you know, we get to a point where we can actually maintain, and we're not only operating the roasters, but we're maintaining them to a point as well. It's pretty much everything but electrical. So you should be able to pull that machine apart, put it back together. And then, of course, electrical,
everything.
That's, 100%. Like that's, and, you know, in terms of maintenance and, you know, all that kind of stuff, that's, you know, like a
tradie,
you know, like with cars. Yeah, exactly. Like a mechanic. You're basically like a mechanic for your roaster. You just can't do the electrical, and that's fair enough. So, and the gas, of course. But yeah, general maintenance is, definitely like a trade. It
should be a trade. I mean, there's enough there to learn that it should be like there should be a program to have a 3-year apprenticeship, so that you get to the point where once you finish that apprenticeship, I mean, there's no reason why hairdressing is a trade and becoming a roaster isn't a trade. If we formalized some kind of, you know, some pathway to become a qualified trade roaster, coffee roaster, that would be so helpful to everybody.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of that barrier to entry, if it then does, then I don't know. It's still too easy, I think, to set up. I don't know. It's still a little bit of that whole barrier to entry, but also the job prospects.
Yeah,
it's not guaranteed. So.
You know what's the big concern for me for this barrier to entry thing right now is that the only person who's going to end up winning out of this is the roasting machine manufacturer. because there's so many machines being sold right now, and
Yeah. Yep.
this whole like no barrier to entry for people to start their own businesses. Not that I want to stop people from, again, I want to reiterate this on behalf of Anne and myself. We don't want you to not open a business. We don't want you to not be successful. The exact opposite of that. We want you to be successful. We just don't feel that the way to be successful is to do this without having any kind of experience or support in doing this. Because, and roasting manufacturers aren't going to encourage what we're suggesting, because they stand to win out of this, right? They just sell fuck tons of machines without having a duty of care to make sure that people know what they're doing with these machines and how they're going to build a business out of them. And look, I understand it. Who says that you have to know how to operate any piece of equipment that you're going to use to run a business? Who says that you're going to need to know how? It's not Apple's responsibility for me to understand how I'm going to use a laptop if I'm going to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
It kind of, yeah, for some reason I thought about, licensing and cars. It's like, well, we can't buy a car. We can't buy a car without a license, can we? Is that a dumb question?
It's not a dumb question at all, because I don't know.
I don't think, can we?
I have no idea.
Surely you've got to have a.
Surely you've got to show them your license at the time of purchase.
Yeah, for your. So then I guess it could be.
We need something
dare
like
I
that.
say, with
an apprenticeship.
Yeah, with manufacturers. Yeah, to prove that you've done some sort of, you're licensed to, or you're competent to a point where you can operate the machine, because I'm sure manufacturers have sold machines to inexperienced people
that have burnt buildings down.
Yep, and they've definitely not operated the machine correctly, and caused enormous amounts of damage. And of course, this person's just going to go, well, whether if it's under warranty or not, it's not their fault, kind of thing. So whereas, the manufacturers could have a little bit of gatekeeping, if there was that, dare I say, that kind of like, show me your roasting license.
Give me some proof that you're not going to burn a building down.
Oh my God.
I had a previous client who was an elixir dealer in Australia, and he had sold a roasting machine to a company that had operated cafes for many years. And they decided that they had enough funds to buy a roaster. They bought a roaster, and on the same day that they had their installation ticked off, they burnt a building down.
Oh my God.
First batch.
Yep. Oh my God.
And they sued him.
Kind of, unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah. They sued him.
They sued him. You sold us a faulty machine. And he's like, I didn't sell you a faulty machine. It's been in my warehouse for years.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with this machine.
Yep.
But, I mean, this is the consequence of what happens. These people were learning how to roast. And on the first day that they had this machine, they burnt the building down.
That's insane.
But
yeah, that's pretty intense.
And these are the kinds of things we want to avoid, right? Because what that means is that business, all the cash outlay, they have immediately stopped their success path. And we want to, we want people to get successful more quickly, not end up with a weird barrier that stops them from being successful, right?
Yep, exactly.
What do you think is going to happen as a consequence of a shutdown that's going to be around for another couple of years in the coffee industry?
Oh, I mean, well, I guess depending on now, I guess here in Australia, where we're seeing different states operating, fairly differently.
Because you're still in shutdown, aren't you? You're in total lockdown.
We are. We're in like stage 4, full on, movement restrictions. You can only go a certain amount of kilometers and all that kind of stuff.
You're not even allowed to drive to do exercise.
I think it's still within
5K.
the 5 kilometer radius. Yeah, yep. But yeah, it'd be kind of odd if you would drive to, because you're really only meant to be exercising for an hour anyway. We've all got permits too, you know, for me to go roasting. You've just got to have a work permit showing.
How do you get it?
You know, where you're going. So you just download it off the government website. It's got a link. So it's quite easy to get that. You've just got to then get whoever it is that you're going to. So as a sole trader, I've got one, you know, as a sole trader. But I also got the guys at Project where I do the roasting just to do one for me anyway, because that's essentially where I'm headed to, you know, to do their weekly roasting. But it's really interesting. Like, I've yet to be stopped, you know, by the police in terms of, you know, to say, hey, why are you out and about? You know, show me your permit kind of thing. I think they're focusing maybe more on some of the outer areas, right, where it's, you know, they really want to stop people moving in and out of the city or that kind of stuff. But I haven't seen anything yet, you know, probably because I've said it today, but which is fine. There's no drama with, you know, you can show them you're moving around for a reason. I guess where I'm getting to is, where I was getting to was in terms of seeing how businesses are operating right now, in the sense that it's all takeaway, like it's all like Uber Eats, you know, all of those online platforms for the cafes. Local cafes are still allowed to have people walk in, you know, to order, walk out, wait outside, get their coffee, that kind of thing.
Oh, so you guys can go inside a cafe?
Just to order, but then you've got to go outside to wait. You can't be inside, none of that. If cafes have done their setup properly, they've all now got like acrylic barriers around their counter.
Like Perspex?
So that, yeah, kind of like a bank kind of setup, you know, is where you can, you know, just really encouraging, you know, just paying with card, no cash, you know, all this kind of contactless, you know, ordering and pick up and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, if they're for the, you know, Victoria region in particular, like if there's, depending on how long, I think it's like September 13 when they reassess this, like they're calling it a state of disaster still.
Wow.
Yeah.
How bad
so
is this still increasing in cases?
I think it's starting to go down, but it's still in the hundreds.
Every day.
Yeah, and then like unfortunately the death rate is kind of like in the teens to the 20s, kind of hovering in that kind of daily. It's going down, but then they're also concerned, which is kind of really interesting because we're all, you know, meant to be staying home, but they're encouraging people to still go get tested. So not as many people are going out to get tested. So that's probably why I think a lot of the cases started coming out, is because all of us were trying to do the right thing and go out and get tested. And then all those results are just filtering through, you know, daily from all the daily testings, which is great. I'm really confused as to why New South Wales isn't exploding.
I know, right.
I'm really scared. I'm really scared for New South Wales. There's something's not right. I don't understand their numbers. I don't understand.
For anyone who's not Australian, New South Wales is the state that Sydney is in. And it's massively populated. It's the most densely populated state in Australia.
Yep. And they've got similar situations in terms of clusters and outbreaks that we've had. And I just don't understand why the numbers aren't coming through. So I really, really hope, you know, it doesn't all of a sudden flip. And then New South Wales is next to then, you know, really go hard, having to lock down pretty hard. But yeah, for cafes, depending on when we're allowed to then break off from stage 4 and go back to, I think it's stage 3 where we could still have limited numbers. No, that was still walk-in, my apologies. God forbid, if we ever get back to stage 2, that would be amazing, because then it means that, you know, businesses can open up with limited seating again.
How do you get there? This is the part that's confusing me. How does Melbourne
Yep.
get there if you're currently in lockdown?
I guess.
I mean, transmissions, you have to close your borders completely. Like, what happens?
So that's all done. Everyone's borders are shut. Like, no one can move freely around Australia anymore. Everything's shut, which is great.
Right.
And they're saying now that it's definitely going to carry over. Everyone's just saying, Christmas, don't even think about
Visiting family.
Everyone's going to be like staying put. And I guess the great thing in Melbourne, I guess they are, obviously like everybody watching the numbers. They're hoping that with now masks being mandatory everywhere, that's helping, hopefully to prevent any airborne, transmission. But yeah, I guess it's a numbers game, and I guess it's a matter of going by the health organisation recommending. They seem to feel that this like 6 weeks is kind of like the magic, kind of time frame for things to peak and then to start then, showing the effect of us actually locking down. So I think that's how they came up with that date in terms of, September 13. So yeah, almost, 6 weeks of, I think we've got another 3 weeks to go. So it's been 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks. This is the third week. Another 3 weeks to go. So yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so I guess it's a numbers game and a matter of just trying to do as much as possible to make sure that we can stay home and don't move around, only move if we have to.
Can cafes survive, do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess
even well-run cafes.
Yeah, because it's interesting because like with the things like JobKeeper that the government created to help cover wages, I mean, when you think about it, then if the only overheads that the cafe has then is the trick is them generating enough business to be able to then cover the cost of goods, like buying,
just the operating costs,
covering
as well.
their supplies. Correct. Yep. So that's their challenge. So then if the business isn't set up to operate, to be able to generate, enough to cover supplies, then unfortunately then potentially even really well businesses may not survive if they can't generate, enough business to cover supplies. It's got to be tough being a supplier, I reckon, right now, because every business is going to be going, well, if I can't generate enough business to be able to pay you on time, then they're going to be having to take a hit in terms of really extending payment terms and really working, suppliers and cafes have to work so closely now. And it's really going to highlight what kind of relationship you have with your supplier. Had a really great conversation with Carlos from CoffeeNet.
Shout out to Carlos. He's such a fucking great human.
Yeah, he's amazing. And he said that, it's definitely highlighted to them, relationships that they've got with roasters and how roasters, how, certain people work and don't work, highlighting their level of because he said they've had to be and will be as flexible as possible. They'll do everything possible to support roasters. They know that they're not going to get paid for months by certain roasters.
He's that kind of human.
But they're 100%. And he's happy to keep on supporting, as long as they support him. Yep. That's all he asks.
If you're in Australia and you are looking for a green coffee supplier, call Carlos from CoffeeNet. If you need his information, contact me or contact Anne. He is one of 100%. The best humans in the Australian coffee industry. And I mean, he's opened up in the UK. I think CoffeeNet's opened up here as well. If you are looking for a green supplier, and this is not a paid advertisement, he is just a fucking great human.
He's just
support
his
business. CoffeeNet, CONI. No, COFINET.
Yep. Yeah. But yeah, sadly he had to abandon plans. He was actually on the way over to the
Yeah, he was
US
going to
when COVID broke
living
out.
in COVID, right? In
Yeah.
COVID. Yes, it is
Yeah.
COVID, California. We should be calling it COVID. We've got
Yeah.
the highest
But
number of rates in the US.
oh, really?
It
Oh.
is atrocious, Anne. What's going on here?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
it's not pretty. But anyway,
No. Yeah, so he realized that even if he went over, it was just all that
yeah,
timing, with all the isolations and back and forth, and they would have gotten caught in a
yeah.
not a good place. So they obviously really sad that they couldn't get a chance to set up in the US, but they kind of think it was a good. They're happy they made the call to
Yep.
stay for the moment. Um, but yeah, just in terms of his business ethic, um, he's going to be hurting
For years.
big time. But he just wants to support
Yep.
roasters. And again, as long as they support him, in an appropriate way as well. So,
I got to get
um,
him on the
and
podcast.
I think it's the same. Yeah, definitely. It's the same for cafes as well. It's really going to highlight supplier relationships. It's going to highlight those that you want to work with or not want to work with, and suppliers back to cafes. They're going to go, well, hang on, it'll showcase. Level of expectation versus, look, if you can't make a payment, just be really clear and upfront. That's all they want to
Yep.
know. That's really all they want to know. If you're struggling, then let's work out a
Yep.
plan. And if there's no ability to work out a plan, then that's when you kind of, where some businesses might get in trouble, particularly if they've been not necessarily great to a supplier, and then all of a sudden they're expecting the world from this supplier because it's COVID. I think then that's when issues will definitely, pop up.
This is not a time for people to
Yeah,
be looking to fuck each other over or take advantage of each
definitely
other
not.
or anything. This is a
No.
time to build closer bonds and to support each other, and how can I have your back, and I got you, and how can we work together, and like, let's just forget, business as usual for the moment. How do we survive this? Because 5 months ago we were saying, we're all in this together, we're all in this together, we're all in this together, and that was a comfort point. What I think is
Yep.
happening now is that people are seeing the inevitable squeeze of the longer this goes on, the more people's profit and loss statements are going to be reflecting the shorter and shorter runway that's available to them.
Yep.
And, even really well run businesses that run a tight ship, they understand, exactly what's going on. They are going to get squeezed because they're running at such slim margins when it's business as usual. And now they're
Yep.
in a situation where they're trying to run a business that was running on 3% net profit. Now they're going to cut their business in half. They're going to cut their revenue in half. And so
Yep.
running a business at 50% capacity of what it was, if you're lucky, and trying to cover just the fixed costs
Yep.
on those kinds of, profit, the idea of profit is completely out the window.
Yeah.
Completely out the window.
Yeah. Now, exactly. Yep. Yeah. At the moment, it's just cover costs. It's just cover. Just make sure you can
renegotiate leases. And
Yep.
I had a client who had opened a really successful cafe, has been running it for a number of years, and he's such a good operator. I loved going to his cafe whenever I was around here in California. 3 days before COVID hit, the Ides of March was when there was that big lockdown.
Yep.
3 days before that, he signed a lease for a brand new cafe.
Yeah. Wow.
And he couldn't get out of it. They got
Yep.
lawyers involved. They tried to just say, like, we've got to give the keys back, whatever. And the landlord said, you can get out of this contract for $200,000.
Oh my word.
I mean, $200,000, he may as well just take that and reinvest it in the fit out.
Yep, exactly.
And so now the great thing about it is it's right next to a hospital. So, small blessings, but this is not the time. In his mind, it's like, this is not the time to be taking on all this extra stress when there's about to be gargantuan economic collapse here in the US at some point in the next 12 months. We're in this weird state of suspended animation here in the US where people are just waiting for them to tell us how this is going to get fixed. And so people seem to think it's all going to be fine because the economy was doing really well before COVID. So all we need to do is just get back to business and everything's going to be okay.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't know where people are getting this idea that that's going to happen. Because herd immunity is a philosophy. For anyone who's like waiting for herd immunity, it's a philosophy. And what I mean by that, I'm going to preface this by saying I have a genetics degree. I know this shit. Herd immunity works as a theory. If there are 5 people in the room and the majority of the people get a virus and that virus does not mutate, the virus has less of a probability of ending up infecting everybody else because the majority of the people who have contracted it have already had their own inbuilt immunity. But if herd immunity was a real thing, in all cases, the influenza virus would have died a long time ago.
Yep.
This is the same. I mean, if there's any correlation to make between the flu and COVID, it's this. Stop waiting for herd immunity. It's not coming. I think it was the WHO was talking about the COVID strain in India is going to need a completely different vaccine than the COVID strain that's in America. And even the COVID strain on the West Coast versus the East Coast is not the same strain. So for people who don't who aren't familiar with what herd immunity is, it's the idea that if 70% of a population get a virus, then we should be good. We'll all be protected. The majority of people will be protected because we have an inbuilt immunity. Because the majority of people have had the virus by that point, 70%, the likelihood of the virus to continue transmitting and being as contagious as it currently is, this is a super contagious virus, right? If 70% of the population have had the virus and have an inbuilt immunity, long-term immunity, we end up stopping the virus in its tracks, essentially, right? The thing that they don't know is how long is your inherent immunity, your inbuilt immunity once you've had COVID? They have identified cases where people have had it twice. You look at the chicken pox. I've had the chicken pox twice. What that meant was my immunity when I had it as a kid only lasted so long. Then when I was exposed to it when I was 17, I got it again.
Yeah,
so this is the same kind of thing. It's why herd immunity, look for it. Look for any papers you can find that prove that herd immunity is a complete scientific fact. It's a theory. It's a philosophy. It's one that's accepted by most scientists, and it should be, because in theory, it works. But it requires no variables to change. It requires no mutations. It requires that if we're talking about something like COVID, that let's say the Indian population that has this particular strain, you can't have any cross-population contamination. It means no one's allowed into India once herd immunity happens. And if somebody comes from America into India and then takes that strain back to America, that then starts a whole new infection of a new strain of COVID. This is why the flu is a big problem.
Yep.
So, I mean, anyone who's waiting for herd immunity for us to get back to business, I really encourage you to start getting informed about this stuff so that you are empowered to start making better decisions based on fact, because I'm really, really concerned for the cafe business. Not enough people are seeing the seriousness of the next couple of years. And I'm hedging my bets on, from what I've seen here in the US, and it's not here yet, but the very sobering moment of what's coming will come. And I think you're looking at 8 out of 10 cafes from here to 12 months, maybe 18 months going out of business, because they're not going to be able to survive that long, having to delay their rent month after month after month, or delay their, like, shrink their payroll as much as they have to pay it. Here it's illegal not to make payroll.
Yep.
I mean, I'm sure people think, oh, stop being so doom and gloom and blah, blah, blah. I promise you, I am not a doom and gloom person at all. I'm all about facts. I'm all about, you know that about me, Anne. I'm not about, like, let's make this all scary. And no, I'm a very much a numbers person. And all my clients, whenever they ask me any questions about, like, what should we be pricing our coffee at, or can we open a second cafe, I'm the person that says to them, go figure out the numbers. Let's get fact and proof on, do the numbers say that we can do this?
Yep. 100%.
And right now, we have to figure out what comes next. We have to be, and and that's exciting. As an innovator, as an entrepreneur, I'm very excited by this moment. And the people who are in my business leadership mastermind groups, they're all killing it. They're crushing. Because we're focused on, like, what's happening in 12 months and 24 months.
Yep.
They're all thriving. But I'm seeing a lot of people that are just waiting for the external factors to change so that they can react to those external factors.
Yep. Yep.
And one Miss Ann Cooper is not doing that. I can't wait till we can tell the world the shit that you're doing. It's very exciting. It really is. Like, I got to tell you, again, a compliment coming. To watch you, I remember the day I was getting into an Uber and I was on the phone with you and I'm like, Anne, you need to, do you remember that?
That's
and
right.
That was a tough love kind of conversation. And you called me 2 weeks later and you said, thanks for that. I really needed that conversation. And I've got my ass into gear now and I know what I'm doing. And since that day, you haven't stopped. And you've been like, this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be supportive as I can to all these roasters. I'm going to sort out the online stuff. Thanks for giving me the push that I needed. And I mean, it's my pleasure. But to watch you just embrace the moment and to just run with it has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, again, thank you for your support and
my pleasure.
Being able to, sound off and, kind of question and ask and, kind of, navigate, through it all.
None of us know what we're doing, Anne.
It's really important. Yeah, it's especially when you think you're on a path and then all of a sudden, you're challenged to change, and it's that, well, how do I know, not reinventing, but like, how do I know which direction, how do I, move with the change? How is it going to be okay? And it's quite confronting. So again, because it comes back to that backing yourself, I guess, as well.
It helps when you've got people around you that are equally willing to admit, hey, I'm terrified. I don't know what I'm doing, But I know I've got thinkers
Yep.
around me, critical thinkers that base their decision making in independent thinking and not on a hope and a prayer.
Yep.
You know, that's
Yep.
super important from, in my perspective. I have a big responsibility in kind of guiding people in making decisions that are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of consequences. And I would much rather that they were making those decisions based on numbers than, hey, Lee, what's your gut feel? I'm not interested in my
Yep.
gut feel. I don't have to live with the consequences of the decisions that you make. And I don't want you to have to look back and say, I made a decision based on my own gut feel or Lee's gut feel. That's not okay. What are the numbers telling us? The numbers are telling us that you've probably
Yep.
got a 2-month runway at the current operating costs to cover. Okay, so, and the big problem there is, as you know, most people don't know how to figure that out. Most people don't know how to read their profit and loss
Definitely.
statement. You were telling me something really interesting about the funding in Australia and how that revealed when the government turned around and wanted to give businesses money, but you had to show the government what your profit and loss statement was or something. You had to show them your numbers. Do you remember this?
That's the premise
Yeah.
of JobKeeper. So you've got to show. For me as a sole trader, I just need to show my GST.
That's a
But for
tax thing for anyone that
businesses
doesn't know.
now, yeah. And then now, like moving forward, I think it's after September, you're really going to have to be showing a lot more in terms of showing them what percentage your business has dropped by, but really, really showing you've got to keep all your records with your profit and losses so that if you ever get checked, you can get really big fines if you're not recording or showing them appropriately, how your business has dropped and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think that's going to get stricter. I think
But a
after
lot of
September.
businesses got caught because
Yep.
they didn't know how to understand that data, right?
How to even do it. Yeah, exactly. How to even work out. Well, yes, our business has dropped, but do we have the records to be able to to show that? Which is a little bit scary.
And if you don't know how to interpret that data,
Yep.
like I recently did an episode of the Daily Coffee Pro where like not all data is created equal. But if you can't read the data, if you don't know what data you need to get access to in order to understand how much longer can we survive as a business, you may be getting yourself into a lot of trouble. Renegotiating leases, not realizing that this is a potential death sentence for your business. No matter how much you're going to negotiate it down, it may be time to just close the cafe or put the business into hibernation and just say to the landlord, listen, I can't pay my rent. And if you're going to require me to have to continue to pay the rent, I'm going to have to give you back the keys. Because these liabilities remain your responsibility.
Yep.
It's scary as shit
definitely.
to see what's going to happen.
And the same with like roasters learning how to cost their coffee properly as well. And that kind of comes back to that whole, the people wanting to get into coffee or wanting to roast coffee and then sell it, they're not knowing the right price to sell it at. And then understanding the whole goal of selling coffee is to generate enough capital so you can keep on buying green bean. They just see it as selling coffee. They don't see it as the purpose of selling this coffee at this price is to cover, all your operating costs, your everything else, your labor, blah, 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 so that you can then generate profit to be able to keep going.
So many hidden costs, right?
And so, Yep, definitely. And there's that desire to kind of sell coffee at mates rates because, well, they're mates and they deserve, cheap prices. But then if you don't have, the right amount of volume and you're selling it at this really low price, then you're never going to get ahead. You're never going to be able to operate properly. So, yeah.
Are you
lots of interesting business lessons.
Are you excited? Are you encouraged by the future, or where do you sit? Are you kind of just watching patiently waiting to make a decision, or are you hopeful? Are you excited?
Honestly, probably in that, maybe a little bit of that kind of waiting game at the moment, because we've sort of had this opening up, shutting down kind of situation. So yeah, I guess it would be exciting if we knew that, yes, for sure, definitely on this date in September, Victoria is going to open up and we can start, slowly moving back to some level of normalcy. And that's exciting, because then that means for me that I can start more, face-to-face interaction, with training. That's super exciting. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a waiting game at the moment.
What my big concern is? That this is going to sound terrible, but you got to hate when a sentence starts with "this is going to sound terrible," especially when it's coming out of my mouth, right? I feel like this reckoning for our industry was coming, right? It feels like we weren't running, because of the low barrier to entry. There are a lot of businesses that were running that needed some help to just close down. And this situation, not just the coffee industry, the whole hospitality industry. And actually, like, they call them, I think they call them zombie companies, zombie small businesses. I think that's, and it's the idea, like, they're the Walking Dead. They should have closed some time ago, but they're, they're, because they aren't aware of they're essentially existing off their cash flow, right?
Yep.
And our industry is riddled with that. The whole hospitality industry is riddled with that. And this pandemic gave people an out from carrying the burden of that stress for much that they've been carrying for some time. But now what we've got is this influx of new businesses coming in that are going to end up in the same situation. And so where we had kind of this opportunity where we could have repurposed the talent of previous business owners and kind of absorbed them back into the industry so that we could have elevated the success of businesses that did survive, so that if one business owner who had to close a cafe was then able to go and work as an operations manager for another cafe or a group of cafes and use the knowledge that they'd gained as a previous business owner.
Yep.
What's happening is we're now seeing a massive influx of new businesses, whether it be as roasters or I'm seeing cafes, brand new cafes opening. And who's opening these brand new cafes? Yep. Baristas who are out of work. This is not the time to ask your parents for money to open a cafe if you've never had a cafe before. This really isn't.
Yep.
And I'm just really concerned about, and this is the thing that makes me the most nervous. And I wasn't nervous until this was happening. I was really excited about our future. But now that I'm seeing this happen, I'm starting to get nervous about we're just perpetuating the same cycle.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess I was just kind of thinking, like, with these new businesses opening, if they're opening with the same, this is where there's maybe an opportunity for innovation. Based on response to circumstance. And so if they're setting up these businesses based on, I guess, traditional concepts, if that makes sense, in terms of like what you would have always done. And that's clearly potentially not going to suit the current circumstances. So if they're smart, they'll evolve. In response to what's going on. But if they don't, if they're kind of like, fingers crossed they're not like when I had a cafe briefly in
Did you really?
2000, and I was that, yeah, I was that, you know, I'm an experienced barista. I've managed cafes before. I know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah,
It's not
blah.
as easy as it looks,
Um,
huh?
and no, and definitely underestimating the whole people side of the business in terms of management and all that kind of stuff. And I was in a partnership. Um, the partnership was more the money focus. They wanted to make money quick, and didn't really, you know, get the whole cycle of, you know, the natural cycle of owning a business where you've got to build that trust and you've got to start, you know, going on that journey of ups and downs. And anyway, so yeah, if they're a barista, they're opening and they've got this dream, the dream cafe set
I'm
up
still to see it.
with, whatever. Yeah, but if they're dreaming about whether it's, the grinders they want to use or the equipment they want to use and the menu and the products but it's all based on
The
that past traditional concept of how we were operating. Whereas now, hopefully, where it's clearly more, technology in terms of like online, social media, that, kind of focus, a bit more. If hopefully they've had the opportunity to see that and innovate accordingly and operate accordingly, because it'd be really sad if they did go to the expense and time of setting up this, that dine-in concept, and, not moving with that. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be really interesting because there's definitely been here in Melbourne, surprisingly, still cafes opening, and even in the city, I was really surprised there was a few that opened in the city, which is dead. So I don't know whether they're near, like, Docklands where all the residential is, or where they're in residential pockets and relying on that residential, South Melbourne area kind of, residential, market. Yeah, really.
You know what
really
a lot
tricky.
of it that I'm seeing is that right now people are feeling that I've lost my corporate job. It's been my dream to open a cafe. Life is short now. Their mortality has been served up to them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wait for anything anymore. I'm just going to go and do it. How hard can it be? It's always been my dream to open a cafe. It's always been my dream to be a coffee roaster. And right now, cafe owners that are looking at passing off their businesses are going to tell people what they want to hear if they want to sell their businesses. And so you've got naive people coming into the industry because it's their dream and they've always wanted to do this. And, COVID's going to end and everything's going to go back to normal. Our industry is changed forever.
Yep.
And people who aren't realizing that need to get on board very quickly. So it's I mean, look, the people that you and I are working with in these groups that we're doing, they're doing great. The innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if anybody wants to see a roasting company that's about to launch, that is unlike any other roasting company that is on the planet, go and check out perspectiveroasters.com. What these guys are doing, Sekou One and Reggie Black. Sekou is in Anne's roasting group. Reggie's in my leadership group. And the brand is phenomenal. It's very exciting what they're doing and it's super innovative. They're starting very small. They're working within their own means and they're going to build slowly. But the roasting isn't the only kind of touch point of the brand. It's a multimedia roasting company with lots and lots of limitless potential. And it's been really great for Anne and I to watch that unfold.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of that, innovation in terms of circumstances and what's going on at the moment.
So, I mean, if people want to figure out how to do that, join a group. I mean, it's
absolutely.
Depending on which group you join, it's either $75 or $100 a month. And you can stay, it's a minimum of 3 months, but the relationships that you get out of it. And next week on the podcast, we've got Matteo from Pane Latte, who's in one of my groups. He's
Awesome.
in Adelaide, and he is going from strength to strength to strength with his cafe. It is insane how well they're doing. They're back to pre-COVID numbers.
Excellent.
And going even further than that with the help of Angelo de Blasio, who is also in the group. But this is the thing. We want people to be successful. So, and we want to help them get there. So, Ms. Cooper, I don't know how the fuck that was 2 hours that quickly. That was insane.
I know.
And your cat didn't walk across the screen at any point.
No, I don't know where.
She's got the most adorable new cat. It's fantastic. So, what's next for you that you're allowed to talk about?
What's next for me? Well, I guess, working on.
You can say it if you want to.
Some projects.
It's up to you.
Well, I think I'm. Well, yeah. I mean, definitely. Working on a project and finally, getting my approach into a book format, and using your support, is amazing, and I think it's definitely something that I've probably maybe struggled with in terms of like the thought process, in terms of how to actually just get it down, and make it happen. And it's definitely not, a kickback reaction to COVID. It's something that's been gurgling away for a really long time. And this is, 100%. And it's just, it's having the confidence to back myself to do it and get it down. So definitely, working on that. And
will we ever see a roasting brand from
working on that
and Cooper?
And that's another thing that's been circling around for quite some time as well. I think it's just a matter of, I think for me, like I've said to you before, it's more about being really mindful about the coffees that I select, and being really thoughtful about what it is that I'm choosing and promoting and putting out there, and have definitely got some great relationships.
You should shout him out.
And
Lewis.
Well, 100%. Working with Luis at Fresno, California, and Capricornio Coffees. Well. 100%. And I'm actually going to try and catch up with him this week.
Us?
So I'll get him. Absolutely, yeah. And Capricornio Coffees have also gone through a bit of a rebranding, and working on them with being a little bit more of an ambassador.
Awesome.
With some of their products. So there'll be some opportunity to, work with them a bit more with some promoting some products with them. And I know that I'll always think of something when you finish, but I think it's more about that. There's always been a desire to do a retail, product, Coffee by Coops.
Oh, I love that name, Coffee by Coops. That sounds very fancy.
Yeah, just like, because that's me. That's just kind of like, it's, and it would be very heartfelt and very, very considered, but it would also, have that approach, that perspective of, you're going to buy this coffee and taste it and learn something as well. There will always be, that kind of educational perspective behind it. So
how exciting.
So I guess it would be cool. But I guess I too kind of like, you start going through the motions and you quickly realize how big of an undertaking a project like that is, and I think it's just a matter of then just sorting through the requirements, and just exactly. And just like making sure the right boxes are ticked, and it's just and look, dare I say, not that I'm afraid of being judged, but definitely quite nervous in terms of like, oh, it's something by me going out to the wider world. But I think it's a great way to support my concepts, my approach. I mean, and I'm not afraid. Yeah, I'm not afraid of putting myself out there in terms of that. I think it's an amazing opportunity to support what it is that I'm about, and in terms of, you know, what I teach, and if they like what they're tasting, then of course, hopefully, then, you know, people will want to reach out more and work with me, and learn from me. So yeah, a great way to I guess support what I'm about.
And the world is ready for a roasting book by Ann Cooper, as well as a roasting brand by Ann Cooper. I mean, I think it's one of those things. You've had so many students now that it's time for you. I mean, and you've supported their journey. It's time for you to kind of, you know, make some time to carve out some extra success for yourself, because we're all ready to support your business. And we want to support your business. I'm dying to drink your coffee.
I know. Well, soon.
Hey, you never know which continent I'm going to be on soon. You never know how the tides are changing. Well, you do, because you know what's going on. But anyway, thanks for a fucking great conversation, lady. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You have an open
awesome.
invitation to come on this podcast anytime you've got something you want to chat about. So
thank you. Well, yeah, hopefully next time it is actually promoting the release of the book and the retail coffee. So no excuses now.
It's out there in the world. I'm going to make sure that I clip this out and release it as a clip and promote the hell out of it so everybody knows it's coming.
Exactly.
All right, lovely. Definitely. I'll let you get to your cat and to the rest of your day and to writing the book.
Awesome.
Peace, love and peanut butter, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your day. Have a great day, Anne. See you later. Bye, lovely.
Thank you.